Welcome to Paperbound Realms, where fiction isn't just something you read.
It's something you experience, explore, and have fun with. I'm Brian.
I'm Frosty. How's it going tonight, Brian?
It's awesome. Great to be here again. This is what video are we on now?
I think this is video 4,
Video 4. Wow.
but
Already
I gotta point something out. You look. I can't quite put my finger on it. You look a little different than the last time I saw you.
Yeah, well I
You
started
shave?
yeah, I trimmed up and the thing is I started jogging, but I noticed I was really
Yeah.
slow and I actually increased my speed by about 4 miles per hour. So I'm more
Oh,
aerodynamic now.
by getting rid of your hair there.
Yeah, it's just my ears now that slow me down. So I got rid
Well,
of
see,
some
I
of the
too
germs.
tried to increase my velocity and got this cool fin going
Spoiler.
on. So I'm hoping we'll both see some positive results on that one.
Yeah, it's like a spoiler for the head, you
Yeah.
know? So, what are we talking about today?
Brian, what book got you into reading in general? Also, what is your reading process? And in that vein, is there a book or maybe a series of books that you had to read for school or a project that kind of changed your reading experience or how you plan out your reading experience? Those are kind of some topics I thought we could touch on today.
I like it. It's big. It's a big one. But I
Thanks.
like it. I like it.
Okay, that's
Um,
good.
wow, yeah. Um, I'll let you kick this one off.
Okay. Um, I feel like I've shared this a little bit on the channel before, but I will run through it again because I love talking about it so much. As far as the books that got me into reading, um, anything spooky when I was a kid, I loved. I do remember being read to a lot when I was very young, and whether it was my mom or my grandfather or somebody else, they typically would do a lot of different voices and make it very interactive. And having that kind of energy around reading got me excited about it. So when I was old enough to read on my own, I wanted things that were more exciting, and I would read a lot of Goosebumps and a lot of just really entertaining books that I could play around with myself. So my love for reading has always been there, and it was always cultivated as a kid. So that was pretty cool. Um, my third grade teacher, I would like to say, is responsible for getting me into fantasy by introducing me to the Chronicles of Narnia. And I started with the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think as a lot of people do, and then you find out it's not the first book in the series. So I went back in the school library every couple of weeks and was trying to find more of that series so I could read it. And that was kind of the big spark that lit that interest in fantasy for me. Unfortunately, as I got a little bit older, especially in my teenage years, I backed off of reading a little bit. There'd always be a book here or there. I'd read a Star Wars novel or a history book, an autobiography for like Ferdinand Magellan and some other people. So there was always something going on. But I'd say 2018, what really reignited my interest in reading was Anno Dracula by Kim Newman, and that was a fantastic, just dark, gritty, kind of political, kind of murder mystery type story, and it's got those gears turning again. It got the excitement back, and from there I found The Expanse. The first book is Leviathan Wakes, and it's all been downhill ever since. I've been nonstop reading since late 2019, I want to say, and yeah, just firing on all pistons. That train has been pumping full speed ahead, and I can't get enough, man. I've dove headfirst back into reading, and I've been loving every second of it.
That's awesome. That's yeah. I think I kind of had a little bit of a similar experience to a degree growing up because my dad he's a big science
Okay.
nerd, so we would read the popular science magazines
Oh yeah.
together, and we would go to car shows and get the little pamphlets and just kind of goof around that way. So that was kind of my first like bonding experience with my dad and kind of getting my foot into just reading.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, and it didn't feel much like reading because it was always kind of, it wasn't so scientific like textbook, but it was enough like, wow, they've got cars that'll go 200 miles to the gallon now, or whatever. I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. But
Yeah.
I sort of did the same thing as you did, where I was just kind of, I fell off the bookmobile for a while. Uh, and so I think it was probably around, for me even, yeah, I would say probably somewhere between 2018 and 2020, somewhere around there.
Okay.
But I was at a bookstore, found just a strange book called Brave New World. And I've talked about
Nice.
this before, and I will continue to talk about it just because I love it. Um, but so I was like, oh, that's strange. I'd not really gotten into fiction. High school left kind of a bad taste in my mouth because I got so burnt out having to read Shakespeare all the time. And no,
Okay.
I understand the importance and all of that, but there's a difference between reading for leisure and reading for a grade. And
Well, for sure.
the irony in that is that John the Savage in Brave New World quotes a lot of Shakespeare. So,
Figures.
yeah, kind of a melding of the worlds there. But yeah, it was kind of my first launch into fantasy and like this dystopian. And what's crazy, I mean,
Oh
the
yeah.
book was um, published, and I mean, it was years, 1930 something, I believe.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it's older, and but then there were other books that kind of fell in after that. I always kind of stuck with that non-fiction route, and something that kind of really drew me back into reading nonfiction was the biography of a guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. By a
Okay, you
guy,
mentioned that before.
yeah,
Yeah.
the book was written by a guy named Eric Metaxas. I hope I'm saying his name correctly, but um, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was just such a complex individual, and his story kind of still sticks with me to this day.
Okay.
And but the long and short of it is, I took a long break. I mean, I was out of the
Yeah.
loop for a hot minute, and so those two books played a very pivotal role in kind of drawing me back into reading. Where unlike TV, there's no loading screens or advertisements. It's kind of fun once you get into it. So
That is kind of nice about books. It's like having the premium subscription. You don't have to worry about ads and
mm,
waiting for another season. Like
I
they're
mean,
there. The books are there. Like
yeah, well, and back in the day, because before TV and even radio, that's how people treated it. Like how we wait on the
yeah.
next episode of Bridgerton. I know you're a big Bridgerton but guy, so that's why I didn't
Oh,
know.
totally.
No, but waiting for those next episodes, people were like that with books. Waiting for
Yeah,
it to
that's true.
drop, and of course now they're able to produce them so fast. And when we're waiting on the next Expanse novel or whatever, it's like, this is taking forever. It's weird to think that it actually took even longer. So
And there's so many series out there too. So while you're waiting on one book, you can jump into
we
something
just
else. It's pretty
dive
great.
right in. Yeah, yeah.
Well, kind of following along that, because you mentioned Shakespeare, not to jump these questions out of order, but I was curious about like, if for a lot of people in school, there's required reading.
You're right.
I know there was for me, and yeah, you're talking about Shakespeare and stuff. You had to read that in school. How did that affect your reading? How does that affect you now? You said you're not like necessarily, you get why it's important, but you're not necessarily looking to read Shakespeare for your fun, your daily read. So did that have like a lasting impact on you? And was there even earlier books that maybe altered the way that you view your reading?
Um, it's hard to say because Shakespeare isn't something I think about regularly.
Okay.
I've kind of dipped in individually, read The Tempest, and kind of dabbled here and there, but it's not something I've really stuck with long term.
Okay.
Um, I can appreciate it. Like I said, I understand the importance of it, but
Right.
Mortimer J. Adler kind of talks about it in his How to Read a Book. Like when people are reading, he recommends complex, heavy reads, just going through it, not trying to understand and dissect everything while you're doing, because you get, he says, you lose the forest for the trees. And
True. Yeah.
that's pretty much what happened. You
Yeah.
kind of feel I wasn't the most advanced reader in any of my years in school. So for me, it always felt like, maybe I'm just not a good reader. I like guitar, I like drama, and, the reading thing, it's okay. I can spell okay, that's good enough, I'll pass. But yeah, and I think it did open the door to more ideas and showing that art and literature of antiquity still holds great value culturally.
That's cool. Okay.
Um, that's my take on it. But as far as like another book in school that was kind of a mandatory reading, it was another nonfiction. It's Night by Eli Wiesel.
Oh, I haven't
Yeah,
heard of that.
yeah, so it kind of briefly, it just following like a firsthand account from a Holocaust survivor,
Mm.
and the thing that really fascinated me about that particular piece of work was that, we look at the Holocaust a lot on a macro level. So to see it from a firsthand account where this guy's basically, setting, it's a warning almost,
Or yeah.
in the same vein as like Viktor Frankl and some of these other Jewish authors. So that was a big, it kept me up. It was,
Yeah.
he was
Yeah.
so uh, detailed about things, and he did such a good job of like where you're in his shoes. But that still doesn't even hardly hold a candle to the reality. But there were times where I'm just reading it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm still pretty young at this point, and it just hit hard, and it still hits hard
Wow.
when I think about it, revisit it, or see things. That's kind of, again, when we talk about things that lead us to other things. It was that uh, night kind of opened my eyes toward guys like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Viktor Frankl and the Diary of Anne Frank, and it just kind of was
Right.
this rabbit hole of I have a much more a deeper appreciation for books, but I also have a deep appreciation of the history and some of the things. Like it's not just people writing words. Like some of this stuff, even the fiction, comes from a touch of reality in some
Sure.
form
Yeah.
or another. So, how about you?
That's wild, man. Yeah, it is. It is kind of a shame that because Shakespeare was kind of required reading, that it could have had adverse effects on your reading journey, and I feel bad that it made you feel like you weren't a good enough reader or adequate enough, and like that's a shame because that's definitely not the case. It's I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a tough topic to tackle.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely also see the importance of it. But yeah, that's those are those are two really good examples, and I definitely did not have that experience with my reading in school. So it's wild how differently my my answer would be. I learned from my required reading not to read books that have pets in them because they're probably gonna die. Um, not to spoil anything, it's not exactly a new book, but I early on, like in elementary school, had to read Where the Red Fern Grows.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't feel I feel like it's safe to mention spoilers, but if you have dogs or you're a fan of dogs, don't read that book. Even as a kid, I was like tearing up. I was angry and sad, and like it's awful. Now they didn't push me away from books, thankfully, but it definitely reading that and like because of Winn Dixie and some other books, it definitely helped cater me more towards just regular fiction. You know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
very much into sci-fi, horror, fantasy, the normal stuff now, but as a kid I enjoyed just regular kind of like slice of life type fiction where it could be a true scenario, it could be a true experience and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of hey, there's other people out there living different lives than you. Not everything is the same. Um, Along with that, another book that I had to read was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea
Mhm.
by Jules Verne. That one I did enjoy quite a bit. The problem that I ran into with that book is, from my memory, there are chapters, and I literally mean entire chapters, dedicated to the character that Jules Verne is writing about, looking out the port of a submarine, or the window of a submarine, and describing all of the different underwater fauna and fish that he can see. And I don't mean like there's this longfish that has spines instead of a fin. No, he's going in detail about the color and the shape and like his thoughts on
And
it.
and the fish's hobbies and their likes and if they're married. No.
Man, it's like the book itself is fantastic, and I don't want to
Yeah.
put anybody off of Jules Verne. Like his works are fantastic,
Mhm.
but especially when you're a little bit younger and you're reading chapters of him describing fish and coral and whatever else, it's a little much. You're 3 chapters in, going, please let something else happen.
Yeah.
But it the way that affected me was kind of making me scared to read other authors from that era, or even in like the early 1900s, because even Tolkien was kind of inspired by Jules Verne in the way that he wrote. So it made me a little apprehensive to want to read Lord of the Rings, for
Mhm.
fear I'm going to run into the same problem. So it did kind of, I don't want to say scare me off of like a generation of authors, but it made me more hesitant to dive into authors from a certain era, for fear of
Yeah.
being long-winded for no reason.
Right. Did you have any aspirations to like buy a fish tank after reading the Jules Verne stuff? Did it get you into any of the like aquatic stuff, or was it just like, please, just let's move forward?
No, it was definitely let's just move forward, because I
Okay.
had a fish tank, so I could
No.
go look at fish.
Yeah. There you go.
It was still creative. It was still imaginative. Again, I'm not here just to dog on Jules Verne. It
Yeah.
was interesting. It just didn't need to go on for as long as it did, as many times as it did. Some of
Yeah.
us are here for the actual story and the characters of the story.
You were reading it to the fish, and they're just like, move on, let's go.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of it. A lot of my required reading was more, I don't know if lackadaisical is the word. Like, I didn't do Shakespeare. I didn't
Mhm.
read, biographies of Holocaust victims and stuff like that. So it was a little
Yeah.
more lighthearted, maybe is the word I'm looking for. Thought
Right.
provoking still, but not as serious as some of the stuff that you read in school, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think in a way though, having, like I said, having read that, it probably is kind of one of the things. Even though I took that long break, I do think it's something that did push me into the nonfiction side.
Okay.
And but as I've gotten older, and I know this is going to sound a little arrogant, and I'm just going to be up front.
Sure.
There was a point in time where I was reading so much nonfiction, and again, this is going to sound dumb, that I was like, oh, I don't have time. There's nothing that is going to be gleaned from fiction. I've got all this nonfiction I'm reading, but there has been some of the most profound stories, characters, arcs, tropes, life lessons that I have gained from fiction, as opposed, because the thing is, you think about it, this isn't true of all books, but most nonfiction is relating to like one topic and maybe a couple themes within that
Sure.
topic, but it's limited. Whereas, you know, sci-fi or fantasy, you're dealing with a lot of different, and some of them like Malazan Book of the Fallen, for instance. There's no black and white. It's just various shades of gray, and you're kind of on this
True.
journey,
Right.
just being dropped in the middle of it and figuring things out. So you're kind of having to think critically while it goes back to that whole. It's not a passive hobby, that's for sure. So,
Yeah.
but
No,
yeah,
that's true, man. I definitely agree. And it's funny because I came from the opposite end of the spectrum. I read nonfiction, don't get me wrong, but most of what I wanted to read was all fantastical. All anything
hmm,
imaginative, anything to get those creative juices flowing.
yeah,
So it's funny. We definitely came from two very
it
opposite ends
is,
of that spectrum.
yeah. Yeah, well, I just love how it all intersects too.
Yeah.
Like there's something, and in some of the nonfiction I've read where truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, you talk about a ride. Look, I don't know if anybody's interested, but like I said, that Dietrich Bonhoeffer is just wild. He's a theologian, and he's embroiled in a plot to assassinate Hitler.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, okay, and it's real. You're just like, oh, okay, we'll go with it. Let's go. Let's see what happens here.
That's
So
wild, man.
yeah, but speaking of all these books and what got us into it and what kind of steered us away, as we've been reading more, and as you've been reading more, what's your process looking like now?
So that's kind of an interesting one for me to tackle because I feel like I'm very structured and very off the wall at the same time. I'm a walking contradiction, as my fiance likes to say about herself. I'm following that same vein there. Um, so again, for me, I really like to stick to horror, sci-fi, fantasy. I still like the mysteries and the thrillers. I still like regular fiction, nonfiction, but the three main ones I look for are the fantastical, the made up, the imaginary, the impossible becoming possible. So, because it's such a huge uh, avenue, I either find something that looks interesting and just dive in blind, or in some cases, I will do a ton of research
Mm-hmm.
before I start a series. So I like to watch other people on YouTube, on the BookTube community. I like to read or watch their opinions and share their views on this book or this series. If it stays good all the way through, if it kind of teeters, if it's only a trilogy, is it worth the while and whatnot? So I'll read articles, I'll read blog posts. Like I'll go in depth. I will go through Goodreads and Fable and the other apps and social media places, and if I can see consistently that people enjoy it and they're people whose opinions I normally can trust, then okay, let's go ahead and pick this up and start that process. But like I said, on the other side of that coin, like Empire of the Wolf by Richard Swan, I bought that trilogy and just dove in. I heard little things here and there, but I'm just like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's go for it. And that kind of goes into me being a mood reader. I like to think that I have a pretty structured TBR. I know what books I'm gonna hit next, and like I have them planned out. And okay, I'm gonna do this series, take a break, come back, whatever. But sometimes I can get thrown on its head. I mean, just the past 2 weeks alone, I had three books that I had planned on reading, and I just finished one of them. So, and I've read six books. So, it definitely I'm very scatterbrained sometimes. Of like, okay, next, I'm reading Lord of the Rings. Next, I'm gonna read Richard Swan, and then next, I'm gonna dive into, let's say, The Ritual by Adam Neville,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll start reading Lord of the Rings and be like, oh, but there's What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. Oh, there's Fahrenheit 451. I haven't read that in a while. Let me read that again real quick. Oh, there's another novella over here. Let's jump over here. So
Yeah,
yeah, none of what happens for me in my process of reading makes any sense, and I just do the best that I can to ride that wave. As far as criteria, though, like I said, it's pretty much the big three: sci-fi,
mm-hmm.
fantasy, horror. There are authors that I will continue to gravitate towards, like Stephen King, James S. A. Corey, now John Gwynne. There are definitely names that I look for
Mm-hmm.
in those genres. But yeah, I'm kind of kind of all over the place, man.
Yeah,
As far as depth and ideals, I just love riding the wave and going with the flow and seeing where the story takes me, seeing what kind of journey the author can take me on. I don't like to. It's my escapism. It's my
yeah,
escapism from the real world. So I don't necessarily, like you just said, reading is not a passive hobby, but I don't necessarily need to have my brain firing on all pistons the whole time. I
exactly.
want to cut back a little bit and
Right.
coast and just enjoy the ride.
Yeah, taking it for that just entertainment side. Yeah,
Exactly.
definitely, definitely.
What about yourself?
Well, um, I think I'm a little bit. I can relate to that whole like you're reading a book and then you're just sort of like, Let me just look at the. Let me look at this. Ooh, I do that a lot.
Okay.
And then after I'm done with the book, it takes me a little bit to figure out it's got to be the right book.
Right. Yeah.
I'm kind of a and you've used this term before, a mood reader.
Yeah.
Whatever's striking you. Like right now, I'm just coming off of Tender as the Flesh, and that was heavy.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. My boots are full of concrete after that one, so I'm just like, oh, okay, what do I do now? But so my process is it's a little chaotic, but it works for me. I don't have a lot of time, so I
right.
kind of smush. I do like I call it the rule of three. So I'll do a
Okay.
sci-fi, something spacey. I'll do a fantasy, and then I'll do a nonfiction, and I'll kind of
Nice. Okay.
rotate in no particular order between those three. But the reason that I did that is I'm not worried about mixing stories or characters up because they've all
Sure.
got different flavors. Like when I'm in the
Yeah.
mood for strawberry ice cream, I know where I can find it, sort of thing. So, and I'm also and this might be a topic for later, but I am a habitual dog earer and
Oh,
bookmarker, and I use like tags, to keep my plate. Like just what I bought it, so it's mine. So I just deface these books. Um, so that's kind of my process with that, balanced and but immersive in that aspect. I also like to read like a reflective kind of reading. So
okay.
I'm really apt. I've noticed, especially as I've gotten older, stories that are going to like challenge my view, perception, or like
Okay.
kind of teach me something. And you'll glean that a lot with reviews. Like, we're like, oh,
Right.
I never knew, blah, blah. I noticed that I'm kind of like, ooh, you know, that's cool. So
Yeah.
that I do really gravitate toward that, and kind of in that same vein where it's like fiction driven, but that growth focus, I guess. Like I'm not reading
Okay.
every book to pull everything out of it.
Sure.
There was a quote that I heard one time that said it's very indicative of someone that's into arts to find meaning when there is none. So I try not to overanalyze. There's times I like to just read for entertainment, but
Yeah.
I do keep and this is a kind of a relatively new practice. I would say within the last 6 months or so, I've been keeping what's called a commonplace notebook. So when I see like a quote or whatever, something cool or an idea, I've been putting it in here, and it's kind of helped enrich my reading time a little
That's
bit,
awesome. Yeah.
and really squeeze everything I can out of my time with it. And then I would say my last big thing, and we had talked about this in one of our previous videos, where I felt like I was constantly reading for a quota, with like
Right.
Goodreads,
Okay.
and I do see the utility of it because some people may use that as a driving factor to read more books. Because if they
Sure.
didn't have
Yeah.
that driving factor, they were just like, you know. But for me, it started to like I'd set loftier goals, and then I wouldn't meet them, and I'd be like, oh man, or I'm so behind, I'm not. So anyway, long story short, I'm trying to just read the stuff that I want to read because I enjoy it, and I'm not worried about the numbers. Um, with some of the communities, Paperbound Realms and Fable and all of this, it's cool to have people that you can talk to. It doesn't matter how weird the book is, there's a good chance someone else is reading that book. We've talked about
Yep.
that before too. So I don't feel so hard pressed to pick the newest, latest, greatest reads because there's always, or even artifacts on the internet from, I think I was on a blog trying to unpack a certain idea a week ago, and the blog post was like 9 years old.
Oh
So,
wow.
but just keeping those archive of ideas and things. So, um, but yeah, that's pretty much my overall process in a nutshell. And ideally, if I can lock the door, put the fan on, have some tea, and then my some sort of blanket or whatever where I
Yeah.
can just kind of sit back and just zen out for a little bit. That's, that's the way to go for me.
And along a similar vein of what I was saying earlier and how we're different, I don't have that ritual. If I
Yeah.
can sit or sometimes even stand for 10 minutes and I have a book handy, which I usually do, I'm reading. It's fine. I don't.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong,
My
that's
brain just does what it wants to do.
right. And that's my ideal. I've got a
Well, not always.
not not always, but like if I had an ideal situation, that would be it. But
Yeah, yeah.
you don't always have that luxury. So, I carry
Right.
a bag. I'll read on my, if I'm really invested in a book, shoot, I'll even buy the thing on Kindle and have the regular book, and then I'll flip flop between the two, or I'll do it. My wife is notorious for this because, she'll do the audio book and then she'll flop over to the regular book. And I'm like, hey, you know what? If it works, if it fits into your busy schedule, you do you. I think it's awesome,
Yeah.
So
Kudos.
some reading or niche reading is better than no reading.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And I've seen your books before. I know you annotate your books and stuff like that, and that's awesome. I love that you have a journal set aside.
yeah,
But dog ears, Brian.
dog
I
ears.
thought I thought we were friends, man. You're dog earing your pages? Come on
Well,
now.
here's the bad thing is I have a habit also of cross-referencing books, and I'll use all my bookmarks. Like, I'll go back to that later, so I'll leave the bookmark there, and then I'll be somewhere out. I'm like, crap, I don't have a bookmark. I'm like, yeah, well, bloop, dog ear. So,
Look, next time you go to a big chain bookstore, they
mm,
they usually give you like those really cheap, really thin cardboard like bookmarks or whatever. Just
yeah,
ask for a stack of them. Just be like, "Can I
right.
have like 50?" That way you never have throw some in the glove box, keep some in your bag.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. I'll have one in my wallet that I can just unfold. Hey, maybe that's a good marketable idea. We can like a wallet bookmark, like,
yeah,
and it'll straighten itself out or something. But no, I mean, for me, it's like I don't mind. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to like completely tear my books up, but it's for me, it's kind of pride that like me going back and seeing that. It's like I read the hell out of that book.
yeah, yeah.
Especially nonfiction. I don't do it with much nonfiction or much fiction unless it's
Oh, okay,
really deep and it's like, okay, I know there's a lot that I'm going to pull out of this, or if I'm in a hurry, I'll try to tab it in some way. I'll even
okay.
kind of next to the sentence, I'll kind of tear the page a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. I don't do that. But
I'm like, what?
no, no, but I will dog ear or like even annotate in the margins and stuff because that's just how I roll, man. You're paying. The worst that could happen is I think I'm paying what 12 to 15, maybe $20 for a book. If it falls apart, by the time it gets to that point, I'll just go buy another one. It's just gonna suck to have to re-annotate it and dog ear it again.
Yeah. Well, that's why I like the idea that you have a separate journal for notes and stuff like that.
Right.
I
Well,
like
and,
I
and
like that.
it kind of consolidates it, and
Yeah.
the only so my biggest thing right now because it's new and I haven't exactly gotten my process down with it is recalling like exactly where my stuff is at that particular moment. Like I'll get
Okay.
something and where it's you're kind of connecting the dots, which is the whole idea, and so anyway, I'm still kind of getting my process as it grows and all of that. I'd love to share more information about it if
Yeah.
people are curious, but there's a lot of cool information about commonplace. It's a really old practice and seems to be really effective, and it is keeping my books somewhat cleaner and less dog-eared. Um, so yeah,
That's good, man. And hey, look, I'm giving you a hard time. I don't like to dog ear my books, but if it helps your process and it helps you come back and find things quicker, or make a note of like, hey, there's something on this page I want to revisit, I'm
hmm
all for it. I mean, once, like you said, once you buy it, it's yours. Do what you
yeah.
want with it,
Well, and
and
that's the beauty though. Is everybody's got their own process,
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but
But speaking of books, you mentioned earlier that you've finished Tender as the Flesh. Is that part of like what you've been working on this week, or what
Yeah.
does your reading week look like?
Um, I right now it's just I don't want anything that has hot dogs or spam or bologna as an ingredient. No, no,
God, now I'm scared, man.
no. It was a good read. I mean, uh, definitely well written and all that. Right now, I'm just kind of trying to figure out what
Hmm.
my next read is. So I did a little bit of a book haul today.
Ooh,
So got the Black Prism by Brent
nice.
Weeks.
Okay.
Yep. I'm pretty excited about that one. Actually, somebody in our community, Shade, mentioned that one, so I think,
Oh, cool.
yeah, I picked that one up. A classic because now I am invested into the horror stuff. I didn't find it today. That's on my list, but I did get
Okay.
some Pet Cemetery in
Okay.
there.
Okay.
Um, that's the same look my wife actually gives me too when she's like, "Hey, I need your help," and I'm like, "One more page." And then I'm going to do a buddy read with my wonderful wife.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, so we've got this Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. And so we're going to kind of go through that together. We've not really read much together. So, but I told her, I'm like, I'm going to balance that one. And I'm thinking maybe some Dragonlance. I've been putting that one off on the back burner for a hot minute. So,
That's awesome, man.
yeah.
Yeah, the Buddy Read should be a lot of fun, and Pet Cemetery and the Black Prism, which is the first book in the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can't wait. I actually have Pet Cemetery in my nightstand right now. So if that mood reader part of me jumps out, I can just grab it and start it because I love Stephen King and obviously
Oh, yeah,
horror, so I'm all about it. But that's
definitely.
cool, man. That's a really solid lineup. He said Dragonlance as well, so
Yeah, yeah, they
that's really
just did
sweet.
a really nice reprint. The books they're a little older now. I did
Right.
get my hands on the original, but when I saw that reprint, I was like, okay, that's cool because it's got all the Dragonlance Chronicles in it. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome.
how about you? What do you have on the backlog? What are you reading, getting into?
Man, this week's been kind of crazy. Last 2 weeks have been kind of crazy because, like I said, I had plans to read three specific books. I got through one of them,
Mm-hmm.
but I've detoured and read a novella. I detoured and read Fahrenheit 451 for the third time because
Ooh.
it's really good. I
Yep.
detoured and read some T. Kingfisher. I have another book. It's medium length. It's like 260 pages,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm currently reading it. I'm going to be kind of vague on the information about that, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit later
Yeah.
on. It's kind of exciting. Somebody reached out to me, and we got to talking, and so now I'm reading something, and we'll talk more about that later.
Cool.
But on top of all of that, I am still reading Fellowship of the Ring. I
Yeah.
think I'm like 53 or 54% through the book now. I got to the point where the book like says book two,
Okay.
which yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was a little confused. I thought book two was the Two Towers, but apparently there's a book two within Fellowship. So I'm at that point now.
Mm.
And one that I just started, and I was supposed to start this 2 weeks ago, but Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. It is the first book in a trilogy. And this is, like I mentioned earlier, one of the books that I kind of went into blind. I knew it might be kind of spooky or creepy. I knew there was a murder mystery element to it, so I didn't really know what to expect. And being, I think, 80 pages in, because I just started it last night, I'm already hooked. I'm already like so intrigued in what's happening in this world. And that's the funny thing. Not a whole lot has happened. It's been a lot of like setup and kind of getting to know the three characters that you're spending time with, but it's so intriguing. And there's some elements of Dune with the Emperor's voice, where this one of these main characters can speak and almost command people to
Oh
yield to
wow.
his will.
Yeah.
And you have a young 19-year-old woman who's working as the scribe for this character, and it's kind of going through her journey as she's kind of hot-headed kind of wanted to be with him, kind of didn't want to be with him as his scribe, and it's kind of like her conflicting back and forth where she hates him but also wants to like make him appreciate her. So like there's the conflict there, and there's another character who is a little hot-headed, but he's knowledgeable enough, and they're all kind of getting involved in this murder scandal. And yeah, it's picking up and it's really intriguing. But
Wow.
apparently, it's going to really focus on the horror, so I'm excited to get to that.
My goodness. Yeah, that sounds like it's got a lot of cool irons and the literary fire there. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Yeah. So,
But
but
that's what I'm
yeah.
working on for right now. Just these two thick fantasy books.
Mhm. How was your third read through of Fahrenheit? Would you how'd that go?
It was good. I feel like I pick up on something, or at least like a new um, brain wave going through every time I read it,
Yeah.
and especially here in 2025, and just the way the world is right now and things that are happening, especially here in America, it's scary on a whole new level because it's no longer, oh wow, this could happen in the future and that's scary to think about. Now
Mhm.
it's like, oh, these things the book talks about are kind of happening where it's almost illegal to obtain and seek knowledge for yourself.
Mhm.
And if you try to talk about it and discuss it with others, you'll be shunned. And there's all these TVs and fast cars and flashy this and flashy that to keep you distracted from what's going on around you. And, you know, if you're one of the people who looks away from that stuff to see the reality of what's happening around you, you might just disappear.
Yeah.
So, for being written, I think in like the 50s, 40s or 50s, it's not so much a book of fiction, but a prediction for our current times now, or the
Yeah.
future. So
Yeah.
it's scary,
Yeah.
but
And
it's still fun to read.
if I recall, they were doing a little more than just dog earing the pages of those books too. So, uh, but you know that the thing is though is it's crazy. You know, 1984 Animal Farm.
Right?
You
Yep.
know, it's crazy how far. I mean, you know, to us it seems like really far. It's not that far, but it's crazy how forward thinking some of these people were. Where you just kind of
Oh,
look
sure.
around and you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, you know.
And now half of those are on the banned book list. They're banned.
Yeah.
Now you can still thankfully find them for purchase, and some libraries still carry them, but they're on a banned book list.
See,
And
and
I
I
don't
didn't
remember.
even realize that.
Yeah, I don't remember who said it, but there is a quote out there that no one who ever tried to burn books were on the right side of history, and I misquoted it, but you get the point.
Yeah,
So it's kind of scary. It's happening right now.
you know, yeah. But that's why I'm so glad we have our channel to encourage more people to read, support your local library, you know, and come hang out, you know. And on
Yeah.
that note, what you reading? Tell us what you got going on. What's some books that impacted you? Anything that turned you off from reading? Will you read Tender as the Flesh now?
Who
um,
wants hot dogs on the grill? Let's go.
yeah, it's just yeah. That book was definitely one of the darker reads that I have. I don't want to call it a pleasure of reading, but that I got through. It was a great book, though. I mean, it was like I said, turned everything on its head. But like I said, we would love to hear what y'all are reading. Anything that's impacted you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell your friends about us. Just say there's some strange bald dude and a guy with a mohawk, and they just nerd out about books, and and we would love to hear from you. So,
Yeah, and you can find Paperbound Realms social media. Our Facebook and Instagram is at Paperbound Realms.
mhm.
My personal, I have Instagram and Fable. You can find me at JRFrost Reads.
Yep, and I'm also on Fable and Instagram. You can find me at Brian Reads Daily. I'm always looking to reach out, chat about books. If anything, you know, comes your way, feel free to send it to the Paperbound Realms. You know, chat. We're very active on there too. Met
Oh
some
yeah.
really great people so far, even through YouTube. We're looking forward to it. But Joe, man, it was a pleasure being here and getting to talk books with you a little bit. So
Yeah, back at you, Brian. Always enjoy when we can sit down and have these chats.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, until next time, I'm Brian.
I'm Frosty.
We're Paperbound Realms. See ya.
See you next time.
Did it again.